On this Sega Talk, we hit the road and take the wheel in the Yu Suzuki-designed AM2 Superscaler classic, Power Drift. How did this early kart racer come about? How can we play it if we don't have a local arcade? And was it truly the first kart racer? We talk about all this and more on Sega Talk. SEGAbits presents Sega Talk, a podcast talking all things Sega, with your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. So what?
Hello and welcome to Sega Talk. I'm Barry, and with me is Player 2, George.
Hi everyone. I was going to try to say something like clever, but I couldn't. Sorry.
All right, gamers, let's hop in our car seats and... No, I'm just kidding. It's not that kind of show. So on this Sega Talk, we are talking about Power Drift. But before we get into it, George, why don't you plug that Patreon?
You know what? I think in the future, I'm going to make a video every month with like gameplay and stuff with actually like us telling everyone which Patreons we did. But just for this episode, I'll plug the Patreon manually. And steers in the right direction. So check us out over at patreon.com/SEGAbits, where you could support this show if you like it. $1 gets you the audio, $5 gets you the video early, and there's other tiers like choosing what we talk about, right, Barry?
That's right. Yeah, Patreon pickers at the $20 tier, they get to tell us what to talk about, and our next episode will be a Patreon pick, but this one was actually a personal pick. Why did I personally pick this one? Because I would really love it if we knocked out all the Superscaler games.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to get to like episode 200 and we still haven't talked about Power Drift, for example. We've already done Thunderblade, we've done Outrun. Have we done Hang On? I think we have.
I think we have, but maybe not super hang on. But it might have been these, like we usually kind of combine those two.
Right, yeah, and you know, Superscaler games, like they are their own little category. I think there's a huge fan base behind them. They really exemplify Sega's arcade presence. You look at a Superscaler game, and you're gonna recognize it as being a Sega arcade classic. And what I really love about the technology is it's all kind of the same concept, but it presents such different games. One of my favorite games is Space Harrier. And so if you love Space Harrier, you know, it's kind of like at the video store. If you like this, why not try this? So if you like Space Harrier, why not try Afterburner? Or Outrun? Or Hang On? Or Thunderblade? Or in this case, Power Drift. So Power Drift, it is a 1988 kart racing game developed for the Sega Y-Board arcade platform, and it was designed by Yu Suzuki and developed by his team at Sega AM2. The game makes use of sprite scaling and rotation technology, often referred to as superscaler technology. It's seen as one of the most ambitious efforts on the hardware, as it not only simulates driving down a road like its precursor Outrun, but also features hills and bridges, as well as a camera that tilts as players drive around corners. So here we have a couple photos of the deluxe cabinet. It is quite beautiful.
It kind of reminds me of the Space Harrier one, because that's the little rocket things in the back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, like it's, if you've played Space Harrier Deluxe, this is like a bigger Space Harrier cabinet. It's almost like they took the best of Afterburner and the best of Space Harrier and the best of Outrun and combined them into one machine. It's my only complaint would be that it does not like look like a car, whereas I feel like the Outrun one is just, you know, perfection. Same with Hang On. Like it truly feels like you're in the vehicle inside and out. This one, it's a little more in line with Thunderblade or Space Harrier, where you look at it and you get a sense of it, but there's not like big wheels on the side or anything.
Honestly, if I didn't know what this game was, I'd think it was a plane game, right?
Yeah, it does look like one.
Right.
Yeah. And can airplanes drift?
I don't know. That's a good question.
And also you'll notice there's like a big head little body dude on the top, giving the peace symbol, and it shows all the courses. So that's really the selling point there. They're like, look at all the track configurations this game has. And it has a lot of them. So the game was released to arcades in a deluxe version with a seat that would move in response to the movements of your cart, as well as a standard sit-down version, which I believe did not move, and a local multiplayer version where it was 2 cabinets next to each other. There is also a stand-up version, which is the version I've played, and you can find that if you're in America, at the very least at the Galloping Ghost Arcade in Brookfield, Illinois. So it's one of the games they have that is not deluxe. They have a lot of the deluxe machines. They don't have Power Drift, and they don't have, I think, Hang On, but they have all the other ones.
I'm surprised they don't have Hang On, but
Me too.
Isn't Power Drift one of the rarer scalar games, or is that like Thunderblade 2?
I believe it is one of the rarer ones, and I think the reason for that is it was not shipped as much to the United States. It was popular in Europe, but through my research, I couldn't find if that was because it was so prevalent on the PC side of things, or if it was prevalent in arcades. And we're going to have some long play footage coming through here from the channel AL82 Retro Gaming Long Plays. So thanks to them for providing that service. But George, what is your history with Power Drift?
Well, I played it mostly through emulator. Like you said, I've never seen this in the wild, so I never played it in an actual arcade. I do wonder, how rare it is. Like, I actually would like to play this. I'm sure there's one somewhere in California. I'm sure there's an arcade in California where I could figure out to play it. I played it in emulator, and I played it on the 3DS. Obviously, I think the 3DS version is the superior version so far. I think they did a great job. The widescreen. This one has widescreen, right? If I remember correctly, right?
I don't think so.
I think that might have been one of the complaints. It's weird how they did that, right? Like, some games have widescreen and some don't have widescreen when they release them. I don't know how they choose that, but that's probably the easiest way for everyone to play it nowadays is through the 3DS, which kind of sucks because this one didn't make it to the Switch, right?
It did not, no.
That sucks. This game is probably one that should have made it to the Switch. But, yeah, that's my history with it. What's your history with Power Drift?
Well, for me, Power Drift was always that game that was, like, mentioned alongside the classics like Space Harrier, Outrun, Hang On, Afterburner, and then you'd see Power Drift. And you'd be like, oh, cool, where can I play this? And you look it up, and you're like, man, it wasn't ported anywhere. It looks like a kart racer. It looks like Mario Kart.
Yeah.
Where can I play this? So I did not play it until a long time later when I was able to burn the disc for Yu Suzuki's GameWorks.
Oh, yeah, I forgot it was on that thing.
On the Dreamcast, yeah, and that was actually like maybe 10 years ago.
Right.
Or I'd say like 2011, 2012 I burned it. And then since then, as you mentioned, the 3DS version came out. I will mention that we have had actually a friend of SEGAbits. He's been on the Swingin' Report show multiple times. Chris Tang holds the world record
on this game
for the game. Yeah.
What? I need to talk to. I just. How?
He set the record. Get this. He set the record on November 9th, 2017, and that's when I met him. I was there at Galloping Ghost Arcade that day, so he must have done that earlier in the day, set like a world record.
It always weirds me out when I meet someone and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, I have a world record at this game. You're like, what?
He has multiple. And yeah, his score was 5,590,151. And if you're looking for where to play this, only 5 locations in the world are on Arcade. Arcade? Arcade. AURCADE.com.
Tell me there's one in California.
So I will tell you, you can either go to Bury, UK. It's an arcade club.
All right, I'll go
It's
there.
also at Arcady in Czechoslovakia.
Dang.
That's
a little
it's
far.
At Colonial Soldier Arcade in Deptford Township, New Jersey.
Oh, that's kind of far too.
It is at Galloping Ghost Arcade here.
I'm scared of ghosts. I can't get that.
And then it's at Pungo Pizza and Ice Cream in Virginia Beach, Virginia, which I feel like it needs to be rescued from there.
Right.
Because all the other ones are arcades. This is a restaurant with like a very rare game just sitting there. So I hope it's in good shape.
Call them and ask them if they'll sell it.
It doesn't stipulate either, like, what configuration these are, so it very well could be not, And then in Japan, there are, as of, like, 8 or 10 years ago, there are some, which we will get to. But, yeah, I mean, on a pure technical level, how would you say this game compares to other Super Scalar games that we've talked about?
Well, I think it's more ambitious in a way because most of the other ones we've played in the past have 2D levels, and this one, the track is actually made out of 3D. I don't know. I don't even know what they are, like layers, to make it seem like it's 3D when you turn, so you can make it seem more. So give it that effect that it's in 3D, which is interesting. It is a 2D game. I think it's distracting at first when they do the stage intros where it turns around and then you see all the pop-in. But once once you're in the game, there is no, at least to me, pop-in like Sonic R, where you're like, oh yeah, I died, I hit the wall because it popped in. So they did a good job. Technically, this is actually the most impressive, in my opinion, just because of the 3D track, the way it affects the 3D. What is your opinion on the technology?
Yeah, I think it's really kind of amazing. I would say Thunderblade and Galaxy Force 2 maybe outdo this game, but just as a racer, it I don't want to say it puts Outrun to shame, because I think Outrun is a better game, but just on a technical level, it's really fascinating how they almost use, like, everything looks like logs to me. Right. Like they line up like toilet paper tubes or something, and they just keep moving, but it does give this effect of the ground rising and lowering. Mm-hmm. Another game that does this really effectively is Rad Mobile, which is a super scalar game, but we never really like group it in with these other ones, I think because it's more of a first-person experience, and I don't think it has the same developer DNA as these other ones. And you'll notice that on a lot of Sega arcade games where it's like super scalar technology but from a different team. But yeah, I think it's really, really cool looking, really bright, colorful graphics. As far as the gameplay itself, so players can choose from 12 characters and attempt to beat their rivals over 5 courses labeled A through E, and then each of these courses have 5 tracks. The player must finish third or above in a race to continue playing, and unlike most Sega racers, this one has no in-game timer to beat. So really, it's all about who finishes first in races, and if you do finish first, in all the races, you unlock a 6th special track where the player has the option, and this is really cool, to play as the F-14 Tomcat from Afterburner or the motorbike from Super Hang-On. So, you Sonic fans listening to this, if you thought it was Sonic Riders that really was like the first to do this crazy fan service, no, it goes back to 1988 where they were throwing these. It's funny because like to us now we're like, oh, it's such a nostalgic throwback, but back then it was like, oh, this game's 2 years old. Let's reference a game that we just made last year. But I think that's because those games were already classics of their time, and so to throw them into this game was just really cool. Decades later, Sega would return to this level of fan service, and then some with the Japanese-only release of 3D Power Drift, and we'll talk about that at the end of the show. But how do you think the gameplay of Power Drift compares to other Sega racers at the time, and do you appreciate that they dropped Beat the Clock, so it's more of a beat the opponent kind of game?
Well, I think you had to change the rules, because if this was just beat the clock again, like Outrun, we would be sitting here going, so isn't this just an Outrun sequel?
It's just Outrun 2,
yeah. It's just Outrun, the next Outrun. At the time, they were doing new Outruns, right? Like Outrunners and stuff. So it would be like, why don't you just call this Outrun? So you had to have something change, and I think that was a good idea, changing it to opponents, which... Mm-hmm. I know we talked about Outrun, and I know that Yu Suzuki calls it a driving game, not a racing game. But I mean, once you're beating the clock, it is a racing game, in my opinion. So this is a different type of racing game, and this is more chaotic and more drifting for sure. Like the drifting has been upped like 17,000 degrees compared to Outrun, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's in the name.
You're right.
So it's all about drifting. It's all about jumping around. It's a lot more wild, and it fits because they're go-karts instead of very heavy cars, so they're a little more mobile. As far as the characters in the game, there are 12 available racers, and I would love to run through their headshots and backstories, but I could not find anything.
Yeah.
No, and I should have dug around for maybe a translation of the Japanese Sega Saturn guide, and maybe I'll peek it up as we're talking in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I guess I could read through their names, but it's just I couldn't even find headshots. Their names are Michael, Keith, Jason, Stroganoff,
yeah, that is
Stroganoff.
Yeah. He's Russian.
Tom,
he's the villain.
I guess so. Tom, Mark, Jimmy, Emily, Lucy, Geronimo, Harry, and Eric. And like, I honestly, I think that these characters are just like avatars for the players, and the assumption is that like you pick a character you either look like or one that you just like the look of.
Right.
So as far as like the character roster, do you think it could have been improved with maybe more personality or lore behind the characters? Like Virtua Fighter, you sit down and play that game, no story is conveyed, but in other materials you do get connections. Like, oh, Jackie and Akira, or Jackie and Sarah are brother and sister. This person's like former mentor. But here it's just like it's you know the game Guess Who?
Yeah.
It's like Guess Who. Like they have that much backstory.
And I think like we said before, I think one of AM2's weakest points is their characterization, and I think a lot of gamers go, they don't need it, they're great in gameplay, but I'm like, just hire a guy that knows how to design characters really well. Like, you guys have them in the company, it's just AM2 like doesn't want it. They're like, get out of here, you're designing good characters. Like, when you see a picture of a character, they should convey everything about the character by just seeing them. So like Knuckles, you could tell he's kind of a bad guy. He's more of a bad boy compared to Sonic. Or Sonic being mischievous because of his smile. Or Shadow being the bad guy, obviously, because of the way he looks. So like some of this stuff, you could just convey it in a picture. I think the games that do it well nowadays are newer games, obviously, because they're more thought out in character design, because they spend months and months planning it. But like stuff like Overwatch, like you could tell by a character's picture their personality, right? Oh, this one's the fast character. This one's the heavy character. I can't tell anything from these character pictures at all. What do you think?
No. Yeah, it's very, very light. And I would agree. I think AM2's one weakness are characters. Like, you know, you go through it. Harrier just is cool looking, I guess, from the back, but there's no personality.
It's got a nice butt.
Yeah, I guess. The characters in Outrun are just like male and female. There is no character. I mean, there's the pilot, who I think has a name in Afterburner, but again, like, it's just like a dude with a name. And I'm trying to think, I guess Shenmue is really the only AM2 game with real character, and that's when Yu Suzuki put a lot of time and effort and energy and manpower into developing that.
Right.
I will say that Virtua Fighter has pretty strong characters.
I would say that's an outlier for them for sure.
Yeah, but here, I mean, the question is, does this need it? And I would say no, but I think it would help, because no one is talking about Stroganoff.
Right. I think obviously it was too early for this, but like the idea of just putting all the popular Sega characters in here, like if this came out like in 94, 95, they could have literally put like, oh, Streets of Rage guys in it too, and like marketed it as like all your favorite games and consoles and arcades are in one racing game. And all they would have to do is like put their picture up on the top and you know, headshots from behind. It would have sold more than, I don't know, Jason and Keith.
Right, though it's worth remembering that this never needed to appeal to the console market. It was only in arcades. So
well, this is before there was even a console market for Sega at all. Like the fact that
yeah,
like,
that's true. I mean, Master System was out, but not. I don't think this game would ever be ported to Master System.
There's no way AM2 was like, oh, you know what's gonna save us? The 5 people that bought the Master System
right.
play this game. Yeah.
I mean, Mega Drive was releasing this year. It would have been a cool like flagship game to release with it, but
right.
But I do have good news, and I hate to break the news to Nintendo fans.
Oh no!
But Super Mario Kart was not the first kart racing game. In fact, Power Drift predates Nintendo's Powerhouse Kart Racer by 4 years. But don't tell them that, because they get so picky. They're like, well, does it have weapons? It's Mario Kart's the first weapons based, and it's like, oh my god, like just take the L. But of course, Power Drift is not well known in America. However, as I mentioned, it was a critical and commercial success in Europe, according to several gaming magazines of its time. I'd actually be interested in talking to European fans. Maybe if you're listening to this and you're in Europe, sound off in the comments. Tell us if Power Drift like was a thing for you, because over here we did not know anything about it.
Right.
The game improved.
It just reminds me of like Virtual Fighter, where like it wasn't not popular here, but like it's a phenomenon supposedly in Japan, and it's kind of hard to fathom as an American how popular that would have been.
Well, I mean, yeah, but just in terms of a technical level, the game did improve on super scalar technology. As you mentioned, they had road scaling effects found in games like Hang On and Outrun and Afterburner. But in this one, they simulated 3D space using 2D technology, using, all the tricks. And in our Thunderblade episode, I think we went like cuckoo bananas for how insane those graphics look with Superscalar. Like it's unbelievable how you switch from overhead to straight on, and especially in the 3DS version. We were talking about how in Thunderblade there's these little like cliffs with little weapon, and like it was just wild to see like it's a 3D space, but it's a 100% 2D game, and you get that here too. But I think this is maybe second place in terms of technical wow. Now, do you think that Power Drift predating Super Mario Kart is an important piece of information that Sega fans should hang over Nintendo fans' heads whenever they can?
I mean, they could, but like Nintendo fans will just turn around and be like, well, we popularized it, and Mario Kart sells like a gajillion copies. Like Mario Kart 8 has probably sold more than Sega has sold in the last 20 years in software by itself. It's insane how much that game's... How long has it been out? Like
I
12
take
years?
this, I carry this whip around.
And you hit them?
And I whip the Nintendo fans. I go, whip, get back, take the L. That's what I do.
Are you allowed? Obviously you'll get arrested for assault, but with a whip, maybe not.
In America, you can whip people. You can eat onion rings with your pancakes. These are all legal.
Sadly,
it's true.
Sadly, you could challenge someone to Mortal Kombat
outside of a Waffle House.
In Texas. If
Yeah,
you tell
you
somebody fight me and they agreed, it's legal fight.
It is. So. It is a legal fight. But yeah, I mean, it's not even an argument that Super Mario Kart is like more successful. It
for sure.
did a lot for the kart genre, but Nintendo was not first.
No.
And Nintendo has not been first in a lot of things. People like to think otherwise, but hey, this is a Sega podcast, so we're gonna big up the home company. So thanks to translated interviews with the developer M2, who worked on the Nintendo 3DS port of Power Drift, as well as an interview held by our own Patrick, aka Cory Maru, we know a little bit about the development of the game, which I could not find anywhere else. So it's really these two interviews where you can find a lot of information. So I'm going to be just kind of mentioning some interesting facts, reading some quotes from these interviews. You can check them out. I believe Shmupulations has the 3D Classics ones archived, but they're also on archive.org. And I even started archiving them on SEGAbits before I realized other sites were doing it. And I'm like, well, they're out there now. So let's go through here. So in Patrick's interview with Sega designer Akito Hiroyoshi, SEGAbits reporter Corey Maru asked her about her time at Sega and her work on Power Drift. And first off, here's a photo of Studio 128. It's a former Sega of Japan video game development group led by Hisashi Suzuki, the small studio where programmer Yu Suzuki created arcade classics as such as Space Harrier, Outrun, and Afterburner. I don't know...
Sir...
What's that?
It's a house. It's a house, sir. It's not a studio. It's a house. It looks like a house, doesn't it?
Well, you know, when we did our Young Indiana Jones episode, remember I looked up the address and it was like an apartment. So you never know. Studios can be anywhere. This is the SEGAbits studio. I'm in the Chicago studio. So
well, yeah, but we're not making Power Drift.
We are. George, don't ruin it. We're making Power Drift 2 for the Amico. Yeah, so here's what Patrick asked her. He said, how did you join Sega? What was the experience like working there in the beginning? And she said, I wanted to design toys and tried to find a job, but I failed at every job I tried. I was lucky to get an interview because Sega also made toys, and I was able to join the company. I was lucky enough to be able to join the company. For some reason, I was assigned to the video game department instead of the toy department. I was assigned to the department of Yu Suzuki, who was still producing Power Drift under the name of Studio 128 at the time.
Sega just gets the best, don't they?
They do. Out of all the Sega characters you designed within AM2, which one is your all-time favorite? Is it Janet?
No.
No. I have a personal attachment to all of the characters in the titles that I have participated in designing. Janet is one of them, of course, but Emily from Power Drift, the first character I worked on after joining Sega, is also very memorable. So here we have a photo of the beautiful Emily. And yeah, she's cool. You know what? She looks like a human Amy Rose, doesn't she?
I'm trying to look for... this is Vanilla. Oh, I see her now. Yeah, I guess so. Nice haircut. It's weird. She's like, I don't know. They put a lot of pixel detail into her for sure.
I will say the one thing I really like about this game are the character portraits. I think they look really cool, even if the characters themselves are very light on personality.
Right.
And the mere fact that Emily is the only character we're really doing any form of deep dive in makes her like the strongest character. Yeah, the best character. People say like, "Who's your favorite character?" Barry, I go Emily.
Yeah, Emily. Drift. Oh my god, I'm gonna cosplay as Emily. I think in the next arcade meetup. Emily, you think people will understand who I'm dressed as? Do it.
Next up, we have some footage from the 3D Power Drift for the 3DS, and that's because not in 3D. You don't have to put your glasses on, but
oh man.
I'm going to be reading some tidbits from that interview, and this is actually thanks to the former community team at SEGA of America, who we also... what is it? Oh, yeah. They had some excellent translated interviews with the M2 development staff who worked on the 3DS port of Power Drift. George, do you remember the days when community teams like actually put out
content?
Content that was informational?
No, putting out content's boring, dude.
Right, you need influencers to talk about...
I mean...
No?
They used to put on content. I wonder how successful that was and got people to actually buy the game. That's what I wonder. Like, was it just like not working? Are people not really into reading interviews? Are they really not into information like that? Or do they want a like 10-minute cut video of another? Like, I feel right now, if you're an influencer, like it's either memes and jokes that sell,
right,
or shitting on something that sells. So like, I don't know. It's weird, but yeah.
Yeah, it's telling that Sega quietly shut down Sega Forever. And I think, I don't know, I don't want to air any dirty laundry, but everyone knows that Danny at Sega ran that account. I mean, he didn't keep that a secret. And the fact that he, to my knowledge, is still working there means he didn't want to rock the boat when they closed it down. I don't think he wanted to raise a stink. I think he just wanted, if you like it, let Sega know, but I'm not going to ruin my job. And it's unfortunate. I feel like there's probably been, and you notice that too with Phantasy Star Online 2, ceasing their online streams with that one dude. Remember those?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's almost like we don't want fun, informational, historical content, or we don't want our staff members creating themselves as a personality that, like, the fan bases can, like, relate to and talk to. Like, the days of Aaron Weber are gone. The days of Sega Forever putting out really cool, high-quality scans and, like, working to save the Sega World statues and stuff are gone. Now it's influencer partnerships and memes, and I think it's unfortunate.
And also, basically, I mean, whatever sells games. I think maybe they just shut. I've been noticing this with game companies lately, and it's not just Sega. It's like Capcom also did this whole like arcade thing where they're gonna do a one app you download and you could buy every single arcade game they released, and they did 2 volumes, and they also just kind of gave up. So I'm wondering, is like piracy that bad that no one's buying classic games, or is it just not as much? Like, there was this big chart yesterday about how, like, in 1 year, we got 60 games for the Genesis, let's say. Steam released over 1,500 games in the last couple months. So people are like, it's kind of hard to keep up with games when we're bombarded from all sides now compared to this back then. So I don't know what it is. It's hard to keep people's attention, that's for sure. You know how many good games came out in the last 3-4 months? Well, they did Persona 3 Reloaded. They did the new Final Fantasy remake. They did Yakuza Infinite Wealth. There's a bunch of games coming out that you're like, I don't have enough time.
Well, I think going back to Power Drift, the one developer who really epitomizes like that care and attention for the past, preservation, being, you know, like curious about how things work and how they can find ways to develop new ways to bring us these games is really M2. I think they're one of the last great developers out there who really seem to have a fondness for the past and preservation. And beyond just saying like, oh, I dumped a ROM. Like, they go above and beyond. And so in this interview from Sega of America, translated, it was from Japan, some tidbits I picked out. The team at M2 found developing 3D Galaxy Force 2 to be incredibly difficult, so naturally they also tried to work on Power Drift, which was even more difficult. The development of the 3DS version came directly from the president of M2, Naoki Hori. It is said that one day he handed the team a new 3DS development kit and just said, make Power Drift work on this. Like, that was his goal. The 3DS port was the first Y-board title from the team to emulate sound, and I read about this a lot. I was trying to make sense of it, but mainly I think what that means is they recorded the game sound effects to audio files and played them back, which is easier on the CPU. So it's not the music being played from like the actual source code, if that makes sense.
It's what you would listen to when you were playing.
Right. So it's more like cues within the code would trigger recordings of the original audio. And they did this because they found that, and this was I think 3 months before the release, they were doing Tokyo Game Show demos with the music actually being emulated by the CPU, if that's correct, and it was slowing the game down. So they're like, we gotta emulate the sound. We can't have the sound coming directly from like the source. The 3DS port was based on the deluxe cabinet, which we saw at the top there, and not the twin cabinet version, as it would mean they would have to include network versus play. So yes, the twin cabinet version is like a different version of the game. I think there are different menu options. Obviously, it's 2-player versus there. Sega never provided the source code for Power Drift to M2. However, they did provide the source code for Thunderblade as they were working on it. The team sourced the game's code, funny enough, from the Dreamcast release of Yu Suzuki Gameworks. They were like, where are we going to get this game? They're like, oh, there's a Dreamcast version. Let's rip the data from there. And apparently it's like a preferred revision for them of the game, so they were very happy. M2 recorded the deluxe machine's like mechanical audio of the machine actually moving at a real Japanese arcade after hours as Sega themselves did not have a deluxe cabinet in their own archives. And if you've played 3D Power Drift, you'd know that in a lot of those 3D classics for the arcade machines, you can do the ride-along versions, and it makes the ka-chunk, ka-chunk. And so it's again, like, it's a goofy way to preserve these games, but it's the closest you're going to get to playing this game in a deluxe cabinet. So what are your thoughts on M2, like, in general, how they approach projects?
I think it's weird that they like take so much, like, I would just be like, put the game in the thing, maybe add a couple modes, do maybe a little like history art thing, and call it a day. They're like, we're gonna go after work to a shop that closed up so we could record footage or record whatever the way the arcade moves, so it could be authentic, which is crazy. I do wonder, do you play with the weird moving thing, or do you just play like?
I prefer like the crisp, clean, big, full screen, but I have played it in those other modes just to get a flavor of the machine, and it's fun. It's different. I think I mentioned on, maybe I didn't, because it was, I think the Space Harrier, 3D Space Harrier came after our Sega talk, but I love on the Sega Ages version, you can use the Joy-Con as it uses the accelerometer to emulate the joystick. It's not my preferred way to play, but I just love how it feels, M2 feels very much like a workbench approach, where they just have all these like weird doodads and trinkets sitting around, and they like tape things together, like not literally, but like that's kind of the sense I get, where it's not just people sitting at their computers, but they're like, let's get a recording device. Let's go out to this arcade. Let's play around with the features of this handheld console and see if we can kind of bring home the real world feeling of sitting in these machines. And it's unnecessary, but it's so much fun. And they put so much additional fun features into these games. Like the credits alone are worth watching for every single one of them. They're so funny. So, as mentioned, Power Drift is not as well known as other Superscalar games, and this is because the game really did not see any home releases until a Sega Saturn version released a decade later in 1998 under the Sega Ages banner, but only in Japan, which compounded its scarcity worldwide. And I just jumped on eBay and looked at prices, and you can get a disc only for $40, which... it's not bad, but...
No, it's not the worst.
It's...
I feel like anytime you pay over sticker price, you're getting to the, like, oh, man, this used to cost less. But with inflation, I don't know how that works, right? Like, $50 in 96 is probably like $1,000 today, so...
Yeah, it's an $80 game, I would say, though. There are more expensive copies out here, but if you just scroll through, you can find them. In fact... someone's selling just a case replacement from France for $11, which is kind of weird. Like, how many people have Power Drift cases that they need replaced?
So
probably not that many. But if you get that $40, see, if you get the $40 disc only and then the $10 disc replacement, you're just spending $30 less for an actual version. So I don't know.
I don't know. Power Drift's kept its value better than the dollar, because apparently $80.96 is worth $158 today. So, but just buy a bunch of copies of Power Drift, and in 20 years, it's probably going to be worth more than your dollar you'll keep, right?
I kind of want this though, but that's fine. I've got the burned copy behind me. Yeah, so in addition to that, the game was ported to PC Engine, and in North America and Europe, the game was ported to a variety of home computers, including, and I'm going to read a lot of them out here, the Amiga, the Amstrad CPC, Atari ST, Commodore 64, IBM PC, MSX, PC Engine, and the ZX Spectrum. And as a subscriber to Retro Gamer magazine out of Europe, I know all about these wacky PCs. And
what do they do?
This did not exist in the U.S. We were not a PC country. Were you going to say thank God?
Well, I'm saying, like, I feel like this is going to get people a little upset, but I feel like Windows and Mac really did do a lot for operating systems back then to make it more user friendly. So I don't know how I would be catch on to this kind of
would
stuff.
not have the patience. I've watched videos. I've watched, like Angry Video Game Nerd episodes and stuff where he shows the process of working with these. And it's just, I as a kid, I couldn't do it. I had a IBM PS2 as a kid. Not PlayStation 2, but PS /2.
I was like,
and
dang, you had a PS2. That's awesome.
That was like, you pop a CD in or you pop a floppy disk in, and it would load up, but there wasn't much more to it than that. But these ones where I'm like, wow, you type in code, you have to like load like multiple disks. I remember that being a thing, but I would not have the patience for that for like games.
And I don't know, like they probably were totally different too. So like if you were on a Commodore 64 and then you went to your friends and he has a, I don't know, Amiga or whatever, and then you're like, oh, all the commands I know are totally different and I can't use this. I have to relearn everything. It's like, at least when I'm on a Mac and then on a PC, like Windows, you could navigate it. It might be annoying because it's not perfectly what you're used to, but you're not going to get lost, in my opinion. So like that's why I'm glad we're not a PC country. Thank the Lord.
Thank God. Remember we talked about in a previous episode those books where it was it was a book that contained the code for a game and you would enter it. Oh my God, that's insane. Like we had code books, but it was like press left at the tree to unlock a free apple. Right. But yeah. And we're actually going to go through a lot of the PC versions. We're going to take a look at some video clips because they're wacky. But yeah, as you would expect on all these computer versions, they lack sprite effects and are massive downgrades to the original arcade release. Still, they were critically well received at the time. And of course, also mentioned, the game did see a release on the Sega Dreamcast in Japan by way of the book Yu Suzuki Gameworks Volume 1, which featured a bonus disc featuring ports of Super Scalar games. And again, this was Japanese exclusive, and it's reasonably expensive nowadays, like $100, $150. But you can burn a copy of the game, which I have. And this footage we're going to watch, it's the Atari ST version of Power Drift, just to give us a taste.
All right. Well, Emily's on it right in the beginning. That's good. That's a good sign. So, definitely a downgrade so far. The music is not as crisp.
I like Tom.
Let me get to the gameplay real quick.
Yeah.
It feels like it's almost mostly not gameplay. It's like just the...
It looks like you're playing screenshots, doesn't it?
Well, I'm waiting for the... Oh, yeah, it does look like... Holy... Yeah, this is not good. It's like 2 frames per second.
3, 2, 1, go!
Now, what if I told you this is one of the more arcade-accurate versions?
Oh, no.
Yeah, it gets worse.
The game does?
For other platforms.
Oh, I thought they were all... Okay, I thought they were all going to be into this. So this is the whole... I thought all the versions were in this one. And the music's horrible. The noise of the engine's like... It's like...
There's no music.
No. And that's the best part of the game. Or one of the best aspects of the game.
All right. Shut it off. I can't look at that.
Yeah, this is terrible. I'm sorry.
So, have you played any of these versions?
No.
That we've talked about? No.
Why would you want to play anything outside of the arcade? That's kind of like... I don't know. It's like, I love the Mega Drive ports of Sega arcade games like Space Harrier. It was cool when you couldn't go to arcade, but now I'm like, just play the arcade version. Do you have any epiphany for a demake that is a better arcade version, but you still play the lesser version because of nostalgia?
I really like some of the Master System ports of Sega arcade games. I think there's kind of a charm there, and it's maybe because I'm still playing on Sega hardware. Same with Game Gear. I do actually really like 3D Space Harrier, or Space Harrier 3D on the Master System. I think that's a cool game. But I'll have more to say. I'd like you to see some of the other ports later on. But speaking of ports, so there were plans to port the game to the Mega Drive. However, such efforts were later moved to the Sega CD before the project was canceled. The project would have been handled by Dempa, which is a third party who ported several Super Scalar games to PC platforms, as well as handling the Mega Drive port of Afterburner 2. Sega did continue the effort with an attempt at a 32X version, but this version has never seen the light of day, and we don't even know how far along it got. But, like, I have my fingers crossed for one of these days we're going to get a leak, and it'll be, like, a really playable version of the game. That would be sweet. But I have a feeling they probably struggled
I would
to
guess
get
so.
that. Yeah. The gameplay for Power Drift might be recognizable to Sonic fans, as the Game Gear Sonic Drift games lift the gameplay concept and infuse characters from Sonic the Hedgehog. So let's do a little what if, like Marvel what if. So what if, in an alternate reality, Sega decided to release Power Drift to home consoles, but it was reskinned with Sonic characters, and it came to the Mega Drive or the Sega CD or 32X as Sonic Drift. Do you think this would have been a success?
I think if they put more effort than Sonic Drift, and that was on Game Gear, so it's kind of hard to judge it because the hardware was really weak. If they did it on the Mega Drive and they kind of like took the idea behind the arcade, but then made it work on consoles well enough. Like, I don't know if you played the original Mario Kart, but it runs really badly. Like, looking back now as an adult, right? So if it ran it at that, it would have been a huge success, especially considering how it was Sonic Mania fever at the time. I mean, it was at its height. It would have sold like Sonic Spinball sold. Like, this would have done a gajillion times.
I think Sonic Drift, like a reskinned Power Drift Sonic Drift with 12 characters. So let's say this was 1990.
That's more than Team Sonic Racing, I think.
Yeah. So let's say this was 1996. They would be able to do Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, Metal Sonic, Eggman, Vector, Charmy, Mighty, SBO, and that leaves like 2 more characters. Maybe Fang and I don't know, like another character. But
you could just bring Yuji Naka. He's a character.
Yuji Naka.
He's like driving.
And so I don't think it would have saved the 32X, but it would have really, really helped. I think it would have. I mean, and again, we are speculating. This never was something in discussion. This never happened, but I think that would have been the best way to bring Power Drift to consoles and make it a success. As for the Sonic Drift Game Gear games, have you played those? Do you have any opinions on those?
The Sonic Drift Game Gear games?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're poop.
Really?
I like the aesthetics of them. I like the idea behind them. I just don't think they run well enough. And I feel like all Sonic racing games have kind of been whatever. Like the only Sonic, I think the Sega All-Star stuff was done pretty well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. All-Stars Racing Transformed are fantastic. I have a lot of nostalgia for the Game Gear Sonic Drift games.
I love the art in front. The cover art is so amazing.
I think it's because I've played the games like in the dark, late at night on my actual Game Gear, and like there's just some magical moments in that game, which sounds really lame, but like Rainy Savannah, I think has some really like emotional, haunting race music with the lightning going on. It's kind of scary.
Has Sonic Drift ever been put on vinyl? Probably not. I'm surprised all the music hasn't. I'm like, who would put Sonic Drift on vinyl?
Yeah,
right?
No, we have vinyl on the brain because before we recorded, we talked a bunch about vinyl.
Oh yeah,
video game vinyls. Yeah. But I don't know. I have some nostalgia for them. I think once you play them enough, you get really good at them, and then it becomes fun. But yeah, they're not the most accessible Sonic games. And I'd also, not to get people to hate me, I find Sonic Riders very difficult to get into. I own them, and I've never played them enough to like enjoy them.
Like I've seen my cousin. He like I remember a long time ago when the game was like maybe 3 years old. We had it and we were playing, and I sucked at it. I was like, I don't get this game. I
don't know how it's not pick up and play. That's my argument.
And then he comes in and he just starts doing all this weird stuff, and he's like going super fast, getting number one in all the races. And I'm like, oh, I see. This is one of those games. Yeah, I was like, dang, jealous.
So let's do the opposite of cleanse your palate, and let's get back into those PC versions. So we saw the Atari ST version. So the Amiga and Atari ST versions of the game were programmed by Zura Z.K. Johannes of Software Studios, better known by his alias ZZKJ.
Oh.
Amazingly, Sega provided no assets or source code to the team.
I feel like this is kind of like a trend.
It is going to be a trend. So they had hundreds of photos of the arcade machine in action, as well as footage of someone playing the game. And that's all they had to go off of it. So remember how I said that game looked like someone playing screenshots? Mm-hmm. They literally made the game based on screenshots. Isn't that insane?
They didn't even have Photoshop. I wonder how long it took. They didn't have generative AI Photoshop to make it easy.
Yeah, right? Yeah, so the game was spread across 2 floppy disks on the Amiga and 3 on the Atari ST. Players would have to choose between either hearing music or sound effects on the Atari ST version, which explains why we didn't hear any music. The Amiga version, however, had both music and sound effects. The game averaged about 6 or 7 frames per second, which I think you saw if you're watching this on video. It was like, 1/1000. So that's 1/1000. 2 1,000. It's like, wow, cool. It's like a slow flip book. The Commodore 64 version of the game was written by Chris Butler, who also converted Thunderblade. Work began in February of 1989 with a deadline of September, and his contract had a 250 British pound penalty clause for every week missed past the deadline. So not only he would get paid, but they'd penalize 250 pounds of his salary, which sucks.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before. A power drift cabinet was given to the team for 4 months, but it was taken away and sent elsewhere after that. And the end result looks like this. So let's check out the Commodore 64 version of Power Drift.
Do we have to?
We have to.
Okay. Activision. Emily is looking very bad in this one. Man, poor woman.
Jason
is he's like, I can't even see his face. He has like a Instagram filter. The color, okay, the sound is amazing. Obviously none. Okay, here we go. This one has music. Something. Okay. Well,
so
this looks.
Think of this though,
amazing.
This game was ported to several PCs, and this looks low quality to us, but imagine if this is probably the best racer on the platform.
So these computers cost like $10,000, and somehow they're playing a game that the color isn't even right.
This looks playable, though, I will say.
But does it look better than the Master System Outrun game?
No. It looks better than the Atari ST, which looked better.
It has music.
As screenshots, but this one actually plays. I can see
Smoother?
myself playing this. It's
this is playable. Yeah. This is playable, but definitely graphically, it leaves a lot to be desired. It reminds me more of Outrun with the trees and stuff than it does the actual power.
Right, and it's also interesting that it even though it's a port of a Japanese game, it really lacks the charm of an AM2 game. Mm-hmm. If you were to tell me, though, this is from a British developer, designed from the ground up, I'd be like, oh yeah, this looks like some British guy's game. It just does not exude a Japanese developer AM2, and that's because it wasn't made by a Japanese developer. But yeah, it's.
We can all agree, right? Sega lost the source code in the game, right? That's why they never give it to anyone.
That could be it. The next one we're going to look at here is the ZX Spectrum version of the game. It was created by Software Studios and programmed by John Mullins with graphics by Clive Paul. Again, Sega did not provide the team with any source code, meaning the game was created by watching videos and looking at screenshots. The graphics were reduced to simple outrun-style roads, and corners and hills were simulated. The horizon was static, and the camera did not rotate, and the screen updated at about 8 to 10 frames per second. So, are we looking at it now?
Yeah. Tiger Electronics video game on PC.
Yeah, 100%.
The colors they chose are interesting. They chose yellow, green, and like blue.
It is 100% like a nicer Tiger Electronics.
You know,
it's like if Tiger could do pixel graphics instead of LED display.
Remember that time when Sonic 2 came out and Al Nielsen was like, "Does it matter how many colors it has? Look how beautiful it is." I feel like putting like superposing this into the the screen, like when he's showing the screen like Sonic 2 versus Mario, and he's like, this one uses 60 colors and this one uses 120. Can you tell the difference? I want to put this game footage in for like, it's just ridiculously low amount of color.
Wild.
The mountains.
And again, it loses a lot of that AM2 charm. The character headshots at the top don't look like...
They just look like random, like they don't even look like the actual characters.
The music sounds good.
There's music?
Yeah, at 5:30.
Let me put the music then. Oh yeah, the music does sound good actually. Surprising.
And again, I was talking about Master System games and how they have that charm. I love the sound of the Master System, so I dig it when they do a really cool like remix.
Like a remake with that's what they call it when they lower the standard of the music. Sometimes they could make some really good chip tunes out of more complex tracks.
I will again. It does look playable too, but it loses the up and down feel. So it just feels like outrun racing, basically. That's all it is. So all right, you can shut that off.
It's beautiful.
So we talked about PC ports, and we have talked about PC ports of Sega arcade games often when we do these episodes. Mm-hmm. What is your honest opinion, and I think I know it, of these massively downgraded ports? Do you find any ingenuity in there, or do you think they just hurt the legacy of the game and honestly look pretty shitty?
Well, I don't think many people even know these exist, so I don't think it really hurts the legacy of these games, because I feel like most of the greatest Sega arcade games had shitty PC ports. Like Space Harrier isn't going to be a lesser of a legacy game in the arcade because it had a terrible port on the Spectrum ZX or whatever. So I don't think it hurts it. It's definitely not a great look for Sega to be like outsourcing. Like, are they that desperate for money? I think the worst part that in history that makes Sega look bad is not being able to provide support for your guys' ports. So now you have bad ports and you're doing this to yourself because you can't provide source code. I think that looks the worst out of everything. But outside of that, I don't mind that they exist. I think it makes people be aware of your brand if you're a PC gamer in Europe. And, and then you're like, oh, now when you see it in arcades, you're like, whoa, this looks way better than my crappy PC version. I have to play it.
It's a fun curiosity. It's a fun kind of like thing to look at as a part of the history of these games. But I'm glad that none of them really overshadowed them to the point where it's like, oh, when people hear Power Drift, they go, oh, it's that really shitty black and white game. Yeah. And I think the one game that actually was hurt by that was by Sega themselves, and that's Super Thunderblade on the Mega Drive. Right.
A lot of people think it sucks because of it.
There are rival fan sites out there, well, they're not rivals anymore because they kind of gave up, who spend so much time ragging on Thunderblade. Like, they would make lists and they would go, oh, here's the 20 worst Sega games, Thunderblade. And I'm like, have you played the arcade version? Because that's Thunderblade. This is a port of an arcade game. So for me to say, you know what the shittiest game is? And you go, oh, what, Barry? Power Drift. Yeah, it was on the ZX Spectrum. It's a piece of crap. And you'd be like, well, Barry, it's a port done by a third party. You know, like, have you played the arcade original? Nah, ZX Spectrum's a piece of shit. I mean, it's like...
Also about arcade ports, like, do you think that, I mean, during this whole time, I think everyone, even I knew as a kid that the arcade versions were way better than the console versions. Like, playing Samurai Showdown in my local grocery store, when I walked by and I played the Mega Drive version at home, I was like, holy crap, what the hell? Yeah. So I don't know, did you know that?
I mean, I kind of feel the same. I personally never liked Altered Beast on the Mega Drive, and then I finally played the arcade version.
It's better.
It's better, but I still don't really like it.
Yeah. Same here.
I'd also say that I know Shinobi's a great series, but that first game,
Yeah. Leaves a bad taste.
like one-hit deaths, like it's just not fun. It's so unplayable. It's such a quarter muncher.
Definitely.
And it's not even if you have it set to free play, it's so hard to get far enough to continue. It's just like I give up on it. And those are some of the worst types of games to me. But in terms of Power Drift, there are other versions. We did talk about the 3DS one, and I would say that's probably the best version.
Oh, yeah.
And thankfully, it did receive a physical release in the West with the 3D Classics version from M2. If you listen to our Thunderblade episode, you would remember that that game, just like Power Drift, lacked a true home console port, and the 3DS version is also seen as the definitive release. Both of these games share the same compilation cartridge, which was a port of the 3-part physical release in Japan of all the Sega 3D Classics releases. The Western release was titled Sega 3D Classics Collection. Well, in Japan, it was called Sega 3D Fukoku Archives 2.
What Fukoku mean?
It's a dirty word.
Dirty.
But frustratingly, the digital version of the game was not released in the West. So the only way that you can get Power Drift, 3D Power Drift, is on the cart. And you might say, oh, but Barry, why are you saying digital is better than physical? Well, let me tell you, little Jimmy at home. The digital version is actually an upgrade. It has a bonus mode where you can play the essentially Sega All-Stars Racing. And here is the roster that we as Westerners missed out on, as well as music tracks. So you can play as, in a little cart, Harrier and Binsbean from Space Harrier, Beast from Altered Beast, Flagman from Outrun, Flagman, you can race as Flagman.
Finally.
Joe Musashi from Shinobi 3, Dralenflor from Fantasy Zone, which is, I think, that big pink enemy, Axel Blaze and Adam from Streets of Rage, Mr. Hang-On from Super Hang-On, Galaxy Lady from Galaxy Force 2, which is the woman from the cover.
Right. Yeah, I was like, okay.
And then Alex Kidd from Alex Kidd. And in addition to that,
why?
Depending on
Alex
the
Kidd
course,
is so out of nowhere. It could have been Sonic. They're like, no. Alex Kidd.
I think it's because these are all 3D Classics titles.
So it's a 3D Classics All-Stars
Racing
mode.
Yeah. And on top of that, depending on the course you pick, you get different music medleys. So Course A has a Space Harrier medley. Course B has an Outrun medley. Course C has a
medley.
It's like a collection of different songs.
Right.
Course C has a Fantasy Zone medley. D is Thunderblade, and then E is Afterburner. And to make it hurt even more that this never released here, let's take a look at the gameplay.
I will tell fans that hacking the 3DS is really easy to get all these software on there, so sometimes it's worth it. But
I'm considering it.
I'm going to play the video.
Doesn't this look cool? Look at this.
It looks amazing. There's some games that are just too rare on the 3DS that hacking it just to play them is probably not a bad idea. No, this is awesome.
Look at that roster on the top. Binsbean. Look at Binsbean.
I know, it's ridiculous that they...
6.
You know, I told you could just put any character from Sonic and just do a back view? They did it. The crazy guys did it, but they're like, we're gonna put random characters from other games.
And this is Fantasy Zone.
I like it.
It's so cool. Yeah, I just think it's... And it really kind of felt like the magnum opus. Like, this was kind of the end of the 3D Classics rate line, so they were like, let's end it with a bang.
They had to hire someone to do all the pixel art of, like, the character's portrait and the back view. That's crazy.
Yeah. It's so fun. So, yeah, if you can import or, much cheaper option, just hack your 3DS, which you might as well do because they've shut the service off.
Right.
They're going to soon.
You can't buy it even if you wanted to, legitimately.
Right, exactly. Which is so funny. Like, not to go on a tear on Nintendo, but like...
They suck with the digital. It's not a secret.
Just this year, they're finally shutting down purchasing on the Xbox 360, and that was... How many years ago is that? Like 20?
Not only that, I mean, I'm just gonna say, like, I feel safer buying stuff on like Steam and like Xbox, even though they had that scare where they might be out of business.
Right.
Than I do Nintendo, because Nintendo is just so like they're like, we're gonna release a Switch 2. I don't know if they're gonna allow you to have your digital stuff. They could just say rebuy everything. I don't know.
Or they were like they're gonna shut down the Wii U marketplace, and I'm like, that was your previous console,
right?
You know. In 2022, Arcade 1UP released the Outrun arcade cabinet for home use at a smaller scale with cheaper materials, and it featured Outrun, Turbo Outrun, Outrunners, and Power Drift. The machine retailed for $600. In an interview with 4Gamer, Yu Suzuki spoke about Power Drift when the machine was released. So 4Gamer said, Arcade 1UP's Outrun also includes Power Drift, which was released in 1988. And Yu Suzuki said, Power Drift was a game that was built with a focus on network-linked technology. At the time, an application that allowed lag-free network competitions didn't exist, so we decided all the specifications ourselves and made it possible for up to 8 players to link together. I didn't know about that. Yeah. 4Gamer said, Power Drift was off-road racing, wasn't it? And Yu Suzuki said, I used to ride my motorcycle on the forest roads around Mount Fuji and do hill climbing, so off-road was a concept I had in mind. Actually, at the time, the game I most wanted to make was a driving game based on the Paris-Dakar Rally, but the market demand was higher for on-road games. Although Power Drift is an off-road game, we gave it a clear identity as a race game by emphasizing the network competition. 4Gamer asks, did you also want to make an off-road motorcycle game? And Yu Suzuki said, of course I wanted to make one. I may not have the energy to make one now, though. I only ride a scooter these days. And he laughs.
You should make a scooter racing game.
I would love an old man scooter racing game from Yu Suzuki. That if they do a Shenmue 4 old person racing,
they kind of did it with 3 with the turtles. That's as close. It's close as we're gonna get.
4Gamer continued, how do you see the remarkable evolution of racing games in recent years? And Yu Suzuki said, what they portray is amazing. The quality of the graphics in the latest game consoles is such that they could be mistaken for live-action video.
They sometimes
when the visuals and sound reach this level of perfection, there is no longer the deciding factor. And in the end, it's about how fun it is to play that matters. Of the titles I've made, F355 Challenge is the only simulator. The others are games. I think that how games will be rated will be based on how interesting the game itself is. So, there you go. And that was actually the only really talk about Power Drift that I could find from Yu Suzuki on the internet. I'm sure he said it somewhere else, but this is all I could find searching. Isn't that funny? It's because Arcade 1UP was releasing something, and they were like, let's talk to Yu Suzuki.
And I think it's funny that... what do you think about the Arcade 1UPs and how they sell them at Best Buy? Like, everyone tells me they're just for, like, bar decorations for people's bars in their homes for nostalgia.
I mean, I can see that. I think they hold up well if you're like a 1 or 2 people in a home playing it occasionally. They do not hold up well if you treat them like an actual arcade machine and like set them up in a bar, like in a public. There was this funny photo that went around not too long ago where someone created a mall arcade and it was all Arcade 1UP machines, and people were like, those machines are going to last a month, maybe. And they were right, because I've seen demo cabinets at Walmart of Arcade 1UP machines, and they were totally broken because they're not made for... It's like...
They're not made for the beating up, like, the hardware that the original arcades had. Like, they were...
right.
They were already made in mind where, like, kids are going to slam the shit out of these joysticks.
Right, and it's kind of funny because the Cybertruck is kind of the Arcade 1UP machine of
trucks,
vehicles. Yeah,
they're like made for California. They're like made for people that drive Teslas.
Right. They're like, you're not supposed to actually wash these cars. What are you doing? But I have always wanted to own one of them, but it's always like I want a special one. I want one that I truly would love. And I think if they did a Space Harrier, like sit down, I'd have to get it.
Right. And I think the sit-downs are limited because I don't even think they sell the Outrun anymore. Like,
no,
once
they
it's been printed, it's been out.
I've looked into it. I was like, I kind of want to get this now. The one that would put me over the edge would be a combination machine that has Sega Sonic the Hedgehog Arcade and Sonic the Fighters. And that sounds like a weird configuration, but The Simpsons did a machine not too long ago where it was arcade controls and then a trackball. So you could totally do it. They have all the configurations there. But I'd get that. That would be mine. What would you get? What's your dream arcade one-up?
I wouldn't mind a Super Monkey Ball now that iDubbbz made that video.
Cool.
When I saw him do the little ball thing in the video, I was like, you know what? I don't think I never played Super Monkey Ball in the arcade, so it'd be cool to have it. I know that the original had the banana joystick. I actually rather have that with the banana. I think it's hilarious having a banana joystick. Obviously, the original Outrun was, but I actually would rather have the original arcade cabinet if I had to do it. But they're so expensive. Somebody here locally is trying to sell a House of the Dead 2 Deluxe arcade with the 2 guns for $1,500, but it's all broken and busted, so it would need to be super like worked on. And I'm like, for $200 I would have taken it to work on it, but $1,500 I wanted usable when you buy it.
Right. The music of Power Drift, I've saved the best for last. So the music has a rocking soundtrack from acclaimed Sega composer Hiroshi Kawaguchi, aka Hiro, you know them best from anything, Space Harrier, Afterburner, like any of those Superscaler AM2 games, you're going to hear their music. I think even Fantasy Zone, right? So in 2011, a CD soundtrack released to Japan featuring the soundtrack as well as unused tracks, special arrangements from the Saturn release, and a brand new arrangement to close out the album. The album is currently readily available worldwide on iTunes, so if you have Apple Music, you can listen to it right now. What did you think of the game's soundtrack, and how does it stack up to other Sega arcade soundtracks at the time?
Underrated. I think it's right next there to Hang On and Outrun. I think obviously Outrun is way better than this. It was my favorite soundtrack Hero's done. Mm-hmm. But this is, I think, is like right under there. Like has some really Hang On-y type tunes in it that just like capture your, like get stuck in your head. You can't help but enjoy them. So yeah, I think this is underrated. I'm surprised there wasn't a re-release, because we got some really obscure re-releases on vinyl before, like Galaxy Force, or you know what I mean, Thunderblade, right, or Thunder Force games. Right. So I'm surprised this one didn't get it, considering the artist, or at least a Hero kind of like all his vinyls. You know how they did the Shimmy 1 and 2 with the box? That'd be nice to finally finish his collection of his music that he did. For sure.
Yeah, it's up there for me too. I'd say maybe second or third to Outrun and Space Harrier. I think I do like the music from Afterburner and Hang On, but Power Drift I just think is more fun. And that's actually, speaking of fun, I put one of my favorite tracks here, which is actually a Sega Sound Team live performance. I love these videos. So if you want to play it starting at 45 seconds, because there's a really long build-up.
You got to build up the audience.
Give this listen.
You know, it would have been crazy seeing SST live back then. Like,
oh, yeah.
It's like ridiculously that they were basically rock stars, but they were video game composers.
Sonic Symphony's cool, but this would have been insane.
Especially then, like, I don't know, like, this wasn't normal. How many sound composers in the 90s were doing full-on rock concerts?
Where is it at in the video that you're playing right now?
It's the guy playing keyboards.
Yeah, isn't that slick?
Yeah, I know, he's slick. You like his Michael Jackson jacket?
I love the key change, I think you'd call it, right? They haven't gotten to it yet, I don't think, but it's just like, I like this song.
No, this is a great song. This guy's, I don't know. I'm not a professional keyboard player, but how do you not get lost on there?
I should get my keyboard back out and I could play this.
Doesn't look too hard, actually.
No, it's actually, I could play this by ear.
Okay. Are you that good at keyboard?
I can play by ear pretty well. If I sit down for like 20 minutes, I can work out the sound of it 10, 15 minutes.
You were trained or just playing? Like you just like play as like for fun, not like actually take serious lessons?
Yeah, I took lessons.
Okay.
as a kid,
yeah,
teenager. But yeah, I can sit down and play. I should try Power Drift next time I sit down.
Oh yeah,
I could be that guy.
Well, you got to get the glasses and the jacket and the light setup.
But yeah, I think going back to the song, which is like it's called "Like the Wind," which is not to be confused with that Sonic song, "Night of the Wind." But I just think the music Power Drift is like fun, rockin', uplifting, silly, which I think is kind of in line with Space Harrier. No, maybe Afterburner. It's like
Afterburner is what it reminds me of the most.
It's very Blue Skies.
Definitely.
And yeah, I recommend anyone to sit down and just throw on the soundtrack. It's a really fun time. So fingers crossed we get a Data Discs vinyl. We always talk about ads on these shows when we can. There are not many ads for the game, but there is this Western released flyer for the arcade cabinet. We can take a look at that here. And it's telling, too, that it is showing the stand-up configuration there, too, which makes me think that probably sold more. And we actually can see on the back the specification breakdown. I don't think it gives the prices, but for those listening on audio, the ad shows a Power Drift machine, which we said earlier looks more like a fat airplane.
Yeah, like a jet.
It's skidding along the ground, and I think the machine really could have sold the idea of driving better if they put the wheels on the base. But it says, the high-performance vehicle designed to keep you on the road to riches, which I guess means you're making money. Oh, it's because you're the arcade owner and you're making money off the quarters.
They're selling it to the arcade owner, not to the consumer.
Right, and I might as well read the copy here. I'll read it real quick. The first thing you notice when you climb aboard Power Drift are the brilliant, oversized 3D graphics. What you don't notice are your knuckles turning white as you struggle to maintain control through hairpin corners, steep climbs, and roller coaster-like drop-offs. Power Drift is the first high-action simulator game to use triple-axis point-of-view graphics. What that means, quite simply, is that the driver's point of view moves with the steering wheel. Right, left, up, down, and forward, backward movements are seen in exactly the same manner as the human eye. Take a corner too fast and you'll see the world take a 360 spin around you. But the SEGA engineers didn't stop there, so neither does the fun. The deluxe Power Drift features a cockpit seat that leans up to 20% or 20 degrees in response to driver commands. Both models feature 2-speed shifter, accelerator pedal, foot brake, and stereophonic sound. Power Drift players are offered a choice of 12 colorful drivers over 5 challenging courses. Each race course features up to 5 stages. Call your authorized SEGA distributor for a Power Drift demonstration ride. It gives a whole new meaning to the term high performance vehicle.
I was gonna look up the address, but it's a P.O. box.
There is a phone number though, George, so we are going to order a Power Drift machine for you right now.
Brand new, please, minty condition. Wow, the place where their P.O. box is in San Jose is alright, I guess.
0201. Alright,
nice.
Let's give this a try. I'm calling it now.
You think they're going to answer?
Do you hear it?
Yeah.
Ah!
Nothing?
It's a fax machine.
No, that sucks.
It's a fax machine.
Well, they have the Tokyo number. They have the Tokyo number way in the bottom.
Oh, let me call Tokyo. No.
Is it normal for businesses to have P.O. boxes in their arcade flyers?
Well, it's interesting that they do give a telephone and fax. I called the telephone, and it went to a fax. So I'm going to call the fax and see if it goes through to a telephone. Maybe
they're changing it up. They're testing
over the years. 0294, right? Yeah. All right. Let's 408. I'm 435. This is on the flyer. 0294. All right. Here we go. Disconnected. Sorry, folks. But hey, if you live in Europe, you can call 01-868-2331 and you can try to order one in Europe. But what we're looking at here on the back is just the deluxe cabinet and the upright cabinet. It's actually very helpful. It gives you all the dimensions, the weight. It's 705 pounds for that deluxe, where it's
Jesus Christ,
307 for the upright.
I was gonna say now that you have like the measurements, you can make room in your basement for it. So when you finally
Exactly.
get it, it's all measured up.
Yep. And that's the stand-up cabinet that I've played there. So yeah, there you go. I wish someone would have picked up. That would have been really cool. But then they'd be like, "We've got your number, asshole. We're gonna get you."
How much do you think one of these would cost back in the 90s? Like they had to charge like 15,000 or some crazy, not 15, maybe 5,000 for an arcade. I don't know. Is that a lot? I don't know.
Sometimes the wiki entries will share how much they cost. Let me see. I got it here. Nope, that's
nice.
for the Saturn. I have the home console prices, but I don't have the arcade machine prices, unfortunately. Yeah, the only thing I could maybe guess is if I look at the Sega Retro entry for Outrun, and maybe they show the arcade. No arcade machine prices. I don't know.
Is there like some sort of like, I don't know, archive at Sega where they had all these like, oh, the prices are this when they came out? Like I've never heard anyone talk about arcade pricing. I guess you have to find someone that used to buy the catalogs back in the day, and they used to own a shop.
Yeah, it's very hard to know for sure. But I mean, they obviously, if you were an arcade owner, it costs less because you're, you know.
Right. They know that you're making money, so I mean,
exactly. Yeah, so to close things out, George, what are your final thoughts on Power Drift? Do you think it deserved more? And where would you rank it among the Sega AM2 Super Scalers?
So I think there's like two tiers of Sega AM2 games when it came to Super Scalers. It was the classics, Space Harriers, Super Hang-On, Outrun. And then there was an Afterburner, and then there was the other games that were like kind of like, so like this one has like remnants of like Outrun in it, and they also try something new. Yeah, I would consider it at the top tier of the second, the lower games. It's not up there with the classics, but it's definitely, I think it's more popular, and I like it more than G-Force or whatever the other ones they were doing.
Oh, G-Lock.
G-Lock, and they were doing all these other like kind of like Afterburner clones with new names.
Yeah, I mean, I there's Thunderblade, Galaxy Force, G-Lock.
Do you think
so? It's almost like
Thunderblade is better than this one, the arcade version, in my opinion. So I mean, I wouldn't put it that high.
Yeah, I would say Galaxy Force is up there too. So I would probably rank it second or third.
Yeah.
On the B squad.
How about Outrunners? Like, not a lot of people talk about Outrunners.
Yeah, I don't have much experience with that, but it's just kind of like if I want to play Outrun, I'm going to play Outrun, not Outrunners.
I feel like Outrunners is more like this game with all the characters they added, all the racers. That's why it gives me an aspect of Outrunners, kind of like it's like a Outrunners but different title. The way G-Lock is Afterburner but with a different title.
Yeah, Outrunners is almost kind of like the Daytona USA 2, where it's just kind of. It's more rare, so less people talk about it. But yeah, I would definitely say that Outrunners is like the car racing version of Power Drift, which is a kart racer,
right?
But yeah, it's I think it's less obscure now because thanks to the 3D Classics release. Even the fact that it's on Saturn and Dreamcast is more than you can say for Thunderblade, which never, ever had a home port until the release of the... what am I thinking of? 3D Classics.
Right.
So, yeah, and I mean, they're even sitting behind me, these two little guys, and then the Astro City Mini and the Genesis ones, like even those weren't able to bring it home. So Anywho, yeah, so that kind of does it for Power Drift. And I'm trying to think, like, what other Superscalers have we not covered? I guess we'll have to take a deep dive into the catalog of Sega Talk episodes, because I'd like to return to these sooner than later. You did bring up G-Lock and Outrunners. I think those might be interesting to talk about, but
some
fingers
games
crossed
to check out at the Galloping Ghost Arcade. Right?
Yeah, and I'm going to be doing a meetup at the end of this month. I have stickers that I'm going to be giving away.
Show them up.
Let me go grab them. Let me get them.
All right. See, everyone, Barry has you guys covered. So
if you show up,
it's free. Sticker.
It is. Well, the stickers are free.
The
Galloping Ghost Arcade's $25. Don't pay me for it.
Yeah, well, I'll pay Barry $25 too, just in case.
So these are from Pseudoshell. So these are from the last meetup.
Wait up, let me get you on the camera. There you go.
So this is Yakuza 0 Kazuma playing Fantasy Zone.
A young boy.
This is Ryo Hazuki playing Space Harrier. And then the new one for this year. So those two were from the last meetup, and I'm going to have those on hand. The new one is Sarah Bryant playing Virtua Fighter, but the game is out of order.
Oh.
And she's eating a taiyaki, I think they're called, the mung bean or the bean paste breaded thingies.
Yeah.
And it's the Sega logo. And I'm actually very happy that the sticker company did not ping this for copyright infringement, because there's 2 Sega logos on here, as well as a little Sonic.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Don't show Sega.
So big thanks to Pseudoshell for, I commissioned her to make these. And yeah, so if you show up, and it'll be fun. Fingers crossed, though, going back to those Superscalers, that they're going to have their big Sega arcade room up and running. They're going to have Galaxy Force 2 machine, Thunderblade Deluxe cabinet, and then the big one is an R360 cabinet. I call it a cabinet. It's like it's a contraption.
It's an amusement ride,
right?
For like
and I plan to, experience it. One of the things I actually really want to do is talk. I don't want to bother them too much, but like I want to know how to operate it. Like I don't want to try it myself, but it's one of those rare Sega arcade machines that has an operator. So I would like to know what the steps are for like standing at this little console and getting it going. I think that would be really cool to take a look at.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, and from what I heard, the weight limit is I think 300.
Oh, that's actually more than I think.
I thought it was 200. But they told me it's 300, so...
most of the arcade ones, I think Sega ones are 250 from what I've noticed. Usually that's basically... So 300 for one that moves in 3D space for a Japanese company is actually kind of like... Yeah, they're hoping that it doesn't break.
And the big news was, too, that their Thunderblade is all newly refurbished because they got another Thunderblade machine and they kind of picked and chose. And I think we talked about this on the last episode. They pick and chose different parts and made it look much more pristine. Though one of the negatives was that the seat itself was like cracked. Like someone's ass was so like not heavy but like firm that it like cracked plastic. Like
imagine having a hard butt that you
can have a big squishy butt and it's not going to break plastic. But this thing was like someone sat on it and like cracked it. It's so weird.
Just buns of steel.
Like Yo Mama has such a hard ass.
Kazuma
How hard
Kiryu?
is it?
Is that Kazuma Kiryu that sat on the seat with his
maybe
firm butt?
He does have a firm butt. But yeah, so that'll be fun. And so I hope to do an R360 episode 2 episodes from now. But George, on the next episode, do you know what you're going to be covering?
We will be talking about Tom Kalinske, a man that changed Sega's future with his success of the Sega Genesis in the United States. We'll be looking at his upbringing, his companies he worked for. He worked for he was a CEO for a little company called Mattel. You might have heard of them. So yeah, we'll catch you guys next time on Sega Talk. Bye.
Bye.